Hello, this is Becky and we're on episode 4 of Tales from Westwick. This has been a pretty interesting week and interesting in many ways. Firstly, I went to the Yarndale show last Saturday with a really great friend of mine. We go every single year. We've been to every single one so far. That's how much we love it. And there's a lot of shopping that goes on there, and I did buy some lovely things. I've got some great stitch markers here, which I don't know if you can see. They're little peacocks, and they're really beautiful. I got some gorgeous buttons. The buttons were particularly good this year, and these are my gardeners themed buttons, which I really like. But for me, although there's lots of really gorgeous stuff there, the show isn't really about buying things. It's about getting some amazing creative inspiration, and there are always so many beautifully knitted garments on display. Often many of the stalls themselves are arranged in really artistic ways, and it's just a fabulous day out being surrounded by lots of other people who love knitting and sewing and fibre arts, and just being able to see so many different combinations of colour and yarn in different garments, and it's just a really inspiring day. So I had a fantastic time there. The other thing that's made this week very interesting, which is less exciting and less inspiring, is that one of our chickens is eating eggs. I'm pretty sure it's one of the chickens, because it happens at night time when they're all locked in their hen house. We lock them in the hen house overnight because there's a lot of foxes around here, and so it is in many ways it is a literal locked room mystery. There are four suspects who could be responsible. Flappy is laying their eggs overnight, which is a pain. Normally we collect the eggs very promptly. We actually go out probably 4 times a day, maybe more times a day, to get all the eggs, so that they're not left lying around for ages. But when an egg is dropped at 2:30 in the morning or 3:30 in the morning, I'm not going to set my alarm every couple of hours and go down in the dark. Not when I've got toddlers and babies who might be waking me up an hour or two later anyway. So she has been laying an egg, or I think she's done it 4 times now, overnight in the hen house, and somebody has been eating it. It's happened twice. I'm really hoping that we can nip it in the bud before it happens again, because I know that when a chicken starts eating an egg, it can develop into a habit which is very hard to break. So this morning I got up extra early, and I managed to scoop out Flappy's egg before anybody had got their beak into it. We are pretty confident it's happening because it is just too tempting to have a source of food in the house overnight. And so one of the ways that we're thinking of tackling it is putting a very small amount of food and a very small amount of water in the hen house overnight, so that if people do get hungry, or if chickens get hungry and get tempted, then there's something there for them to eat before they start on the eggs, and that's something that we're going to start doing. I don't think that it's a lack of protein or a lack of calcium in their diets. We use a standard layer feed that we buy locally, which has the right proportion of protein and calcium in it, and the chickens have free access to oyster shell grit to up their calcium if they need it, and we give them black oil sunflower seeds occasionally as a treat, which are a seed which is incredibly high in protein. I think it's about 15, maybe 16% protein in the seeds, very high. So I don't think it's a problem with the nutritional balance of their diet. I think it's that it's just too tempting having something edible in the house with them. So we've done a lot of research and talked to lots of people about what we might be able to do to solve this issue, apart from putting a bit of food and water in the hen house overnight. You can take an egg, blow the egg out and fill up the egg with mustard, so that when the hen pecks into it they get a face full of mustard, and that puts them off. You can fill an egg with food dye, so when a hen pecks into it, they get a face full of food dye and you can see who the culprit is. Now that's quite tempting, although then that leads us on to, if we discover who the culprit is and we can't stop them eating the eggs, what is our next step? And the other thing which I think that we might try is getting fake eggs, which are really, really hard. So the chickens try and tap them with their beak, and it's unpleasant and they don't get anything and it breaks the habit. So I think the current idea is that we're going to put a bit of food overnight in the hen house. We're going to get up a bit earlier in the mornings and try and collect the eggs as soon as possible, and to carry on collecting the other eggs really frequently over the course of the day, and try and get some golf balls. Fake eggs sounds like quite fake ceramic eggs sound lovely but also sound quite expensive, whereas I'm betting I can pick up some golf balls at a charity shop for next to nothing and they seem to do the job just as well. So watch this space and I'll let you know if we've had any more egg eating going on, and I'll let you know if we find out who's doing it. What else have I been up to? It is autumn. You can probably tell that it's autumn by the fact it's getting quite a bit colder now, and I'm wearing a hat. This morning Josh said it was time to start wearing his woolen knitted socks, because it was getting cold enough for that. And so what I've been knitting this week has been doing some work on a new pair of socks for Josh. When I go to Yarndale, I go on my own. I don't take the kids, it's just me and my friend, and I don't take Josh. And one that's sort of part of the quid pro quo, the kind of me saying, recognising that Josh is letting me go off for a day on my own, is that I buy yarn to knit him socks. And I haven't yet finished the socks with the yarn that I bought for him last year, so that's what I've been working on. These are the socks. It's more green again. Josh dresses relatively conservatively in that it's mostly jeans and t-shirt, but what he likes to have is incredibly bright and unusual socks underneath his sort of jeans and t-shirt uniform. So this is the first one of the pair done. I'm about halfway through the second one of the pair, so it won't be long now. This is the Deeply Wicked yarn, sock yarn, by John at Easy Knits. He dyes this, and this is the Pond Scum colourway. It's got some beautiful blues and greens and yellows, very bright, very vibrant. I don't have a pattern particularly. This is just 72 stitches knitted in the round with a slipped stitch heel because it's reinforced, with a very deep gusset because Josh has a very deep instep. That's one of the fantastic things about knitting and making your own clothes. Josh has a really, really high instep, so I can knit him socks which perfectly fit that. It's amazing, isn't it? So there we go, top down. I prefer to knit socks down because I like to do heel flaps. This is a heel knitted with a heel flap. I think they fit better. I know it's possible to knit a heel flap from the toe up, but it's much, much harder. And when I'm just trying to knit something without a pattern out of my own head, I just default to top down, heel flap, done. That's it. I did buy, at Yarndale, I did buy some more yarn for Josh for his next pair of socks. His Yarndale socks, if you like. I'm just reaching over to get it. And it's more Easy Knits. There we go. This is the yarn. The colourway is called Glowing Orb, and I think it's part of the Dusted Dreams sock yarn that John does. There we go. Lovely, bright orange, not green. I knit a lot of socks with John's yarn at Easy Knits because I just find that the base is really reliable and the colour saturation is really good and they last, so the colour tends to last, it washes quite well, the base yarn tends to wear quite well, and he's a very, very talented dyer and he has a lot of different colour combinations, which I find very appealing. So this is a big thumbs up for John's work there. Mending. What have I been mending? This is a long sleeve t-shirt. It's my long sleeve t-shirt. I might even be wearing it in an earlier video. And I've got a couple of little holes in it. The sort of tiny little, almost like moth holes, which appear in knitted fabrics. I find t-shirt fabric very hard to mend. It's not stiff enough to darn because of the elasticity in it. And so I've always been a bit unsure about how best to mend knitted, like t-shirt type fabric, and often I've ended up just wearing it with holes in until it falls apart and then cutting it up and using it as cleaning rags. I really didn't want to do that anymore though, because it's cotton, and while I try and buy organic cotton, because the environmental impact of cotton is horrendous, organic cotton isn't quite as bad. The idea of throwing away cotton at all after it's had that environmental footprint is something that I'm really uncomfortable with. So I'm trying to look at different ways of getting the most out of cotton fabrics at the moment. And my solution to the fact that jersey fabrics or jersey knit fabrics are very hard to darn or patch because they have so much give in them, is to patch them with small pieces of crochet. So there we go. I haven't really got the hang of showing you things on this screen yet because it's all back to front, but there we go, there's one of the patches. So this is a blanket that I started quite a long time ago now, and I eventually came to the realisation that I was never going to use a sock weight blanket. It's just not warm enough, not thick enough, and I ended up with all these little kind of patchwork triangles and other bits of pieces, and I suddenly thought, why aren't I using these to patch holes? There's another one here on the sleeve. And the advantage of this is that the crochet has just enough give in it. You can see there? That when the fabric flexes, it flexes with the fabric and flexes pretty much to the extent of the fabric as well. So it doesn't feel odd, it doesn't look odd with the way that the fabric moves. And if you use superwash wool, as I have been doing for these little bits, you can just chuck it straight in the wash like you normally do. So I foresee a lot more stitching on of small pieces of crochet on my fabric, my knitted jersey fabric items in the future. Other mending. This is my home study, my home office, and I came in the other day. I'm not even sure you can you see if I get out of the way? This is my mending basket just here, where I keep like scissors and bits and pieces, and you can probably see just underneath it is a big pile of denim. I came into my office study the other day to find this big pile of denim had been put there. This morning I got round to asking Josh about it, and he said that he had taken all of his jeans that had holes in the knees and put them in my study so that if I wanted to mend them I could, or if I wanted to cut them up and do something else with them then I could. But so they were out of his wardrobe and out of his eye line. So I will almost certainly get around to whittling that pile down hopefully soon, because as I said before, denim is cotton. Cotton has a really high environmental impact. Anything that I can do to stop it going to landfill and to stop us buying new cotton is pretty good really. So that's what I'm knitting and mending. That's where we are with the chickens. That's a bit of update about Yarndale, and I've probably, looking at my counter there, just got enough time to talk to you about a book I've been reading. I don't get as much time to read as I used to with two children, but I have been finding a little bit more time for reading, and this is what I've been reading. This is a really old book. I'm only just catching up on it. So I've read quite a few books which are people's personal stories about starting small holdings or downsizing, self-sufficiency. This is one of the classics. It's a bit ridiculous, I haven't read it before. It is the story of Elizabeth West and her husband back in the sort of 60s and 70s when they left the rat race to go and live eventually for 14 years in a very dilapidated cottage in the middle of nowhere in Wales. There's pictures inside of her hiking through snowy mountains 3 miles to get to the local village. There's a lot of chapters around the things that they did to try and mend the cottage in terms of the roof, the problems they had with damp. It is a beautiful, beautiful account of somebody living, I suppose, off-grid. They weren't, there was no electricity, no on-grid electricity, there was no on-grid water. Back in the 60s and 70s, when going off-grid wasn't quite as unusual, I think, as it is today. Off-grid in the UK is incredibly unusual because we're a really tiny island and there just isn't that much in the way of being completely out of civilization in the same way there is in the States. So today, off-grid in the UK is incredibly unusual, not so much then. I do have to give a little bit of a content warning for the book. There is a chapter in the middle where they give what we would now consider to be quite a racist nickname to a bird that came to visit them. So just watch out for that. It's unfortunate, it's a product of its time. It did bring me up a bit cold when I read it though. But there are 2 or 3 fantastic chapters in the middle where they talk about all the wildlife, all the birds that come to visit them and the relationships they have with these birds that go on for several years. And it's a really beautiful account of people who jack it all in, go off to the middle of the countryside, and instead of us pointing and laughing at how much they fail, it is a beautiful, heartwarming account of the kind of companionship they found with nature, which I found really, really inspiring. So yeah, that's what I've been reading. Apparently there's several sequels, so hopefully I'm going to get hold of those as well, and that will go on my bookshelf along with similar books like 5 Acres and a Dream, which I've read and adore. John Seymour has written 2 sort of autobiographies about his experiences. There's The Fat of the Land and I'm a Stranger Here Myself. John Seymour, obviously the kind of the great godfather of British self-sufficiency. And that's it really. So some book recommendations, some mending solutions. I'll tell you next week how we're getting on with the egg-eating chicken. And it's goodbye from me and Tales from Westwick, and see you soon.